So this video is a quick hip opening video. And I know when I first started practice and many people start practicing, they're not really sure what we mean by hip opening. And so our hip is a ball and socket joint, which means it moves in a whole bunch of different directions. So when we say we're opening the hips, we're trying to open the muscles that move the thigh bone in those directions. One of them is the front of the leg, which are our hip flexors. And the biggest hip flexor that tends to get tight is our iliopsoas, and that actually starts in the back and wraps all the way around. So that tends to get tight because we're sitting all the time. And if you haven't heard, sitting is the new smoking. And then the back of the leg is also part of the hip. So those are our hamstrings. They tend to get tight, and most of us are very aware of tight hamstrings. And then also the outer hip muscles, they don't necessarily get tight, but they definitely get weak. And then there's the inner thigh muscles. So this quick class is going to try to open all the way around the hip. And when our hip is open, when it has full range of motion, it helps out the surrounding joints, right? So the knees and the low back. When our hips are stuck, when we've lost that range of motion, then the knees and the low back have to do the work of the hips, which is why so many of us end up with knee issues and low back issues, or it's one of the reasons that contributes to it. So to start today, we're going to come down onto our backs. So you can lie down. And we'll start in figure 4. So you can cross the right ankle to the outside of the left thigh bone, trying to get the knobby part of your ankle all the way to the outside of the thigh so you're not going to sickle your outer ankle. And then push the right big toe mound away from you so that you can't see the sole of your foot. Okay, and then from here, we'll pull the left leg back. And you can either hang on to the back of the left leg with your hands, or if you have a block, you could hop your foot up onto a block, or you could use a strap to lengthen your arms. So we're trying to target the right outer hip here, so that's where you should feel the stretch. And if in finding the stretch in the right outer hip it's causing strain in the neck and the shoulders, right, if you're up here, then that's when you would want to let go of your leg and just use a strap or the block instead. So the body's exit route in this pose is for the left knee to drift in. So try to keep the left knee in line with the left shoulder. And then if you want more sensation, as you pull your left leg towards you, you could use your right elbow or forearm to gently nudge the right knee away from you. And then just breathe into the right outer hip, maybe closing the eyes, starting to focus on your breath a little bit. And so especially if you're tighter, working with the breath can be very helpful. Right? If you're holding your breath, the muscles are also going to hold and tighten. So we want to try to keep our breath smooth and steady. And then from here, we'll just switch sides. You can uncross the right leg and then recross the left ankle to the outside of the right thigh bone. And again, we want to make sure that the knobby part of the ankle is to the outside of the thigh so that we can keep this foot flexed. When this foot is flexed, it's activating the muscles in the lower leg, which is what's supporting the knee here. And then again, our body's exit route, or the way that the body tries to avoid the stretch, is to tip over toward the left. So we know that's happening when our right knee is not lining up with the right shoulder. So try to line the knee up with the shoulder and just notice how that deepens the sensation in the left outer hip. And then gently pull the right leg towards you. Maybe nudge the left thigh bone away from you. You can also press the shin and the thigh bone into each other. Maybe try to lift the low back up away from the floor a little. See if you can feel that deepening the stretch in your left outer hip. We'll take another round of breath here. And then you can uncross the left leg. We'll hug the knees into the chest. And then you can either roll your way up to seated or roll off to one side. And then once you're here, we're going to come into a Sukhasana, which is a simple cross-legged shape. If you feel this in your ankles, you can always move the feet a little further forward so you don't have to have your ankles tucked underneath you here. We want to make sure we're right up on top of the sit bones. So if you're not, you can slide a blanket underneath you or a block. And we also want to make sure the knees aren't super high. Right? That happens when our hip flexors are really tight. So we want the knees to drop down beneath the waist, and we want to be right up on top of the sit bones. And then we'll tent the fingers back behind us, and you can stay right here if your hips are tighter. If and when you feel ready, you can start to walk your hands forward. And then when you feel that little tug of resistance in the outer hip, pause. Take an inhale to lengthen the spine. And then exhale to try to soften into the shape a little bit more. And again, if you're tighter, maybe you're just working with your breath here. So breathing in and out through the nose, trying to allow the steadiness, the softness of the breath to send the signal to the muscles that it's okay to be here. If you want a little bit more, you could work your arms like you're in down dog, so you're pushing the hands into the floor and away from you to try to settle the sit bones down some more. Or another way to work with the arms is to try to pull the hands back towards you so you feel your chest pulling forward some more. And those will give you different sensations in the outer hips. You might want to stick with whichever one is giving you greater sensation. And then when you're ready, we'll start to walk the hands back, lift the torso upright, and then we'll switch the cross of the legs so the opposite shin is in front, which if you haven't done this often, it might feel a little funny. Start by tenting the fingers back behind you. Roll the shoulders back, lift the chest. You can stay right here, or if and when you feel ready, start to walk your hands forward. Pause when you feel that tug of resistance in the outer hip. Should be the opposite hip, or it might be the opposite hip. Inhale to lengthen, and then exhale to fold. So we give these cues in our asana practice, but nothing is universal. We're all put together a little bit differently, so definitely be mindful of what your body is telling you. And if you want to work with the hands or the arms, you can push the hands into the floor and away from you, or you can try to pull the hands back without actually moving them to lengthen the spine and draw the chest forward. Couple more rounds of breath here, stretching into the outer hips. And then we'll start to walk the hands back. And then once you're up, we're going to come onto hands and knees. So if you have blocks, you can move them toward the front edge of your mat. We'll take a second here, setting up in hands and knees. So hands are shoulders distance, the fingers are spread wide, so you're taking up lots of space with your hands. Make sure the wrist creases are either parallel to the front edge of the mat or turned out a bit. And then keeping the arms straight as you inhale, pull the heart forward and up. Try not to collapse into the low back. And then exhale, reverse and round, inflate between the shoulder blades, hollow through the low belly. We'll just take that one more time. Inhale, pull the heart forward, coming into your cow pose. And then exhale, reverse and round, lift into your cat. And then come into a neutral spine. From here, we're going to tuck the toes under, press your hips back and up. And most people will have to step their feet back a little bit when we come into down dog from tabletop. And then once you're here, we'll bend one knee deeply, squeeze the opposite heel down. So now we're starting to stretch into the hamstrings, the backs of the legs. Hold here for a few rounds of breaths. When we pedal back and forth really quickly, we're not giving the hamstring any time to open. So holding here, and maybe lower the right hip down a little bit so you can feel a stretch in the outer left hip. And then we'll switch sides. So bending the left leg, squeeze the right heel down, press the right thigh bone back, lift the kneecap. Maybe lower your left hip down a little bit if you want to feel that stretch in the right outer hip. And then we'll lift high onto the balls of the feet, trying to get the tailbone to lift up. And then settle the heels down toward the floor. They don't have to be anywhere near the ground. If your hamstrings are tight, we want to prioritize the length in the spine. So you can either be high on the balls of the feet, you can bend your knees deeply, or you can do both. And then we're going to look forward, step the right foot forward. And if it doesn't make it to the front edge of the mat, you just grab your calf and pull it the rest of the way up. Then we'll lower the back knee down and grab your blocks. We're going to start to move with the breath because that helps to sort of ease our way into the hips. So as you inhale, sink your hips down, pull the heart forward. And then as you exhale, straighten the front leg. Try to keep the spine nice and long. And take that a few times on your own, trying to move with your breath. And keeping the breath long and deep so there's no sense of being rushed here. You're exactly where you need to be. And then the next time that your right leg is bent, we're going to pause here. So before we go any further, just check your back shin. It tends to want to turn in a little bit. See if you can keep your shin in line with your knee. And then maybe you keep your hands on the blocks. Maybe walk the hands back a little bit. And if you're tighter, it might even feel better to lift your hands up onto your thigh bone. And then initially, we'll all just work with the breath. So with each exhale, let your thigh bone, your left thigh bone be heavier. Let your hips sink forward and down. Okay, so now we're stretching the front of the back leg. Although if you're tighter, you're probably feeling something in the front leg as well. And if you are tighter, it might be best just to work with the breath, because when we start to engage the surrounding muscles, it might start to tighten the front of the leg as well. If you're more open, we'll start to layer in a little bit more work so that we're creating some stability here. So we want to have equal amounts of strength and flexibility. So we'll start by reaching the left big toe straight back, press down through the top of the left foot, pull in and up with the low belly. Stamp the right heel down, try to pin the right hip back and in. Maybe roll the shoulders back. And be mindful of the low back. We don't want to be collapsing into it at all. Okay, one more round of breath here. And then we're going to straighten into the front leg. And you can walk your hands back. So if you have tighter hamstrings, lift your hands up as high as you need to, maybe tenting the fingers on the blocks, because we want to make sure our leg is straight and the spine is long. Okay, press through the ball of the right foot and tug the right outer hip back. Use your inhale to lengthen the spine. You can stay right here, or if your hamstrings are more open, you might be able to fold in a little bit more, but we have zero interest in how close we can get the forehead to the shin. We want to make sure the leg stays straight and the spine stays straight, so it's going to look different for everybody. And if we get really excited about folding in, the back might round, the hip might swing out, and then your body has found the exit route around the hamstrings. So you can come into the basic shape of the pose, but without actually getting much of the benefit. Okay, and then we're going to re-bend the front leg, walk the hands forward. Now heel toe the right foot off to the right, so you can take both hands to the inside of the foot. If you're tighter, you're probably going to want to stay right here. You can also lower the blocks down to any height, maybe lower the forearms down. Make sure that you're still, if you have this mobility, you want to squeeze the inner thighs in, lift the low belly, so you're creating some part of, somewhere around the hip there's stability, so you're not just collapsing into your joints. And if you're tighter, you're just breathing through it. And so our front leg is in what we call deep hip flexion, which means the thigh bone and the ribs are pretty close together. And then the back leg is an extension. We're opening the front of the back leg. And then you can lift back up onto your hands if you lower to the forearms. Heel toe the foot back to its spot on the mat. Set the blocks off to the side. Tuck the back toes under. Step back to your down dog. And just take a second here to feel the difference between the sides. And then lift high onto the balls of the feet. Look forward. Step your left foot forward. Help it all the way to the front edge of the mat. And then lower the back knee down. Untuck the toes. Lift your hands up onto your blocks. And we'll start again by moving with the breath. So inhale to sink the hips down, open the heart. Exhale to straighten the front leg. Keep trying to pull your chest toward your toes. Try to match the movement with your breath, pausing at the top of the inhale, and then pausing again at the bottom of the exhale. And when we move dynamically, when we move back and forth with the breath, just sort of sneaking up on the hips a little bit, easing our way into them. And then the next time that the front leg is bent, we'll hold. And initially, we'll all just work with the breath. So with your exhale, your breath of surrender, let the right thigh bone get heavier and heavier. Sink your hips forward and down. With your inhales, maybe lift the chest, roll the shoulders back. And then maybe check in with the right shin, make sure it's not drifting in. That's another exit route that the body will find to avoid, this time the front of the right leg. You can stay right here, maybe walk your hands back a bit, roll the shoulders back, lift the chest, press down through the top of the right foot if you want to start to create a little bit more stability. Scissor the inner thighs towards each other, root through the center of the left heel and the left big toe mound. And again, be very mindful of the low back. The more we lift the torso, the more we're likely to crunch right into that vulnerable part of the body. And then we'll straighten the front leg. You can walk your hands back so they're under the shoulders. Your blocks can be in whatever height you need them to be so that you can keep the legs straight and the spine straight. Press the ball of the foot forward. Tug the left outer hip back. Use your inhale to lengthen the spine. Maybe notice as you lengthen the spine or pull the sternum forward how you can feel the stretch in the back of the leg a little bit more. It's always interesting to remember that everything in the body is connected. And then we'll rebend the front leg, walk your hands forward, and then heel toe the left foot over. So we're taking both hands to the inside of the foot. You can lift your hands up as much as you need to on your blocks. You could also lower the hands to the floor, or maybe lower the blocks down and take your forearms down to the blocks. And again, you can either just breathe into it if you're a bit tighter, maybe closing the eyes and visualizing the muscles open. If you have more mobility, if you have a lot of flexibility, we don't want to collapse into our joints because that's not at all helpful. Squeeze the inner thighs together, lift through the low belly. Right? There's only so much openness that we need. And then we'll lift back up onto our hands if we lowered. Heel toe your left foot over. Reframe the front foot. Tuck the back toes under, lift the knee. Step back to your down dog. Take a nice long inhale here, lengthening from the wrist to the sit bones. Then at the bottom of your exhale, we'll look forward and either step or hop your feet to your hands. Inhaling, lengthen the spine, Ardha Uttanasana, long flat back, straight legs, maybe slide the hands up the shins if you need to. Exhale to fold all the way in, let your head be heavy. Hinge at your hips, rise all the way up. And exhale the hands together in front of the heart. Inhale, lift the arms. Exhale, hinge and fold. Nice long inhale to lengthen the spine, the heart pulls forward. Fold back in as you exhale, let your head be heavy. Hinging at your hips, rise all the way up. And then exhale, hands together in front of the heart. Okay, adding on, inhale, lift the arms. Nice long exhale to hinge and fold. Inhale, lengthen the spine. Keep your spine long so you don't fold back in. Step your left foot to the back edge of the mat, and then we'll lift our hands up onto our blocks again. And then moving with the breath, inhale, pull the heart forward, sink your hips down a little bit, but try to keep your back leg straight. And then exhale, straighten the front leg. Keep pulling the chest forward. A couple times, bend the front leg, pull the heart forward. Exhale, straighten the front leg, keep pinning the right hip into the midline. One more time, bend the front leg, open the heart. Straighten the front leg, keep pulling the chest away from the navel. And then we'll rebend the front leg, heel toe the right foot over. We'll take both hands to the inside of the foot. Again, if you're more open, you might want to lower your hands to the floor. Otherwise, keep your hands as high as you need to. Drive the left heel back, pull the chest forward, and then hug the right knee into the right arm. And take another round of breath here. And then we'll reframe the right foot. We're going to step the back foot up, so shift into the right foot. Left foot steps up to meet it. Inhale to lengthen. Keep the length of the spine. Step your left foot back. And again, we'll move with the breath. So inhale, pull the heart forward, sink the hips down, maybe beneath the height of the left knee. And then exhale to straighten. Inhale, bend, pull the heart forward. Exhale, straighten, keep pulling your chest away from the navel. Okay, one more time. Again, moving with our breath helps to warm up the hips. And then this time, once your left leg is bent, we'll heel toe the front foot over, take both hands to the inside of the foot. And you can have your hands on whatever height works for you. Press the right heel back, pull the chest forward and press the left arm and leg into each other. Breathe into the hips. Keep the breath and the gaze soft and steady. And then heel toe the left foot over. We're going to step the right foot up to meet it. So shift into the left foot. Right foot steps up. Inhale to lengthen. Exhale to fold. Inhale, hinge at your hips. Rise all the way up. And then exhale the hands together in front of the heart. Okay, inhale, lift the arms. Exhale, hinge and fold. Inhale, lengthen, pull the heart forward. Exhale, step your left foot to the back edge of the mat, and then we'll pivot the back foot down. Heel toe the right foot in, so your front heel is going to line up with the back inner arch, and then have one of your blocks handy to the inside of the foot. We'll climb the forearm to the thigh bone, left hand to the hip, rotate the torso open. So now we're starting to stretch through the right inner thigh. So make sure that your knee is stacked on top of your ankle. Firm the right glute, the right buttock forward and under you. And at the same time, press the top of your left thigh bone back. Angle the tailbone away from the back waist. Or you can think of pulling the navel back to the spine. You can take the left arm up. You can keep it here. If you want to add in a little shoulder opening, maybe wrap the arm back behind you. You can stay here with the elbow and the thigh bone, or you can lower your hand down to the block, and again, whatever height works for you. And you'll know that you've gone too low with the hand if the left side drops down or the right glute starts to swing out. Okay, one more breath here. And then we're going to lower our hands down, take your block with you, pivot your feet to face the long edge of the mat, and then just place the block toward the left foot. Use an inhale to lengthen the spine. And then check your feet. Make sure one foot's not in front of the other. Turn your left toes out a bit. Bend into your left leg. Walk your hands toward your left foot. So still trying to get into the right inner thigh. If you feel an intense stretch here, you can stay right where you are. If you want to lower down, you can lower down. If your heel doesn't come to the floor, slide the block underneath your heel. And you can keep your hands on the ground, or maybe take them to heart center. You could open them up as well. And if you want to take that half bind again, wrap the right arm back behind you. Draw the sternum forward, rotate the torso open. And you do want to make sure you're not sitting in the right knee. So if you press the heel down, it'll help to contract the hamstring. Again, these are bendy people problems. Otherwise, you just breathe into it. And then we'll unwrap the right arm if you wrapped it. Press into your hands, lift your hips, and pivot toward your left foot. Okay, and then just make some adjustments. Heel toe the left foot over. We'll pivot the right foot down. Check to make sure your front heel lines up with the back inner arch. And then you can have your block to the inside of the foot. Climb the forearm to thigh bone, right hand to the hip. Roll the right shoulder back. Okay, check to make sure that your left knee is on top of the ankle and that it's not buckling in at all. Firm the left glute underneath you, and at the same time, press the right thigh bone back. And then can you pull the navel back to the spine? Lift the arm up, stay right here, or wrap the arm back behind you. Now you can keep your left elbow on the left thigh bone, or you can lower your hand down toward the block on whatever height will work for you. So you can go lower, but if you go lower and everything collapses, your body has again found an exit route, or the path of least resistance. Keep pressing the left arm and leg into each other. Try to rotate open some more. And then unwrap the arm, lower your hands to the floor. Set that block back behind you. Walk your hands toward the long edge of the mat. Pausing here for a moment, pull the chest forward. Turn the right toes out. Bend into the right leg. If you're feeling a lot in the left inner thigh here, keep the hips high, both feet planted. If you're not feeling much, maybe lower down. So the left toes point up, and if the right heel is not on the ground, you can grab one of your blocks and rest the heel on it so you have support. Then maybe take the hands together in front of the heart. Maybe open, wrap the arm if that feels nice, and then check your left knee, make sure you're not collapsing into it. Inhale to draw the heart forward, exhale to rotate open. And then you can unwrap your left arm, take the hand to the floor. This time we're going to straighten into the legs, walking your hands back under your shoulders. You can just slide that right block out of your way. Check to make sure the toes are lining up. Inhale to lengthen the spine. And then exhale, maybe folded. And so lift the kneecaps, engaging the quads, maybe peel the toes up. Lift the shoulders up away from the ears. We want to avoid them collapsing down. And then maybe just shift from heels to toes, trying to land so that all four corners of the foot are pressing down. And then walk the hands forward. Inhale to lengthen the spine. Take your hands to your hips, pin the elbows in, rise all the way up. And from here, you're going to set up for triangle. So your blocks should be behind your ankles already, but if they're not, you can pull them in. And then from deep within the right hip socket, externally rotate your thigh bone so the toes are pointing toward the front edge of your mat, and then lift your left heel up and drop it back a bit. Inhale to lift the arms, squeeze the leg muscles to the bone, begin to reach the right fingertips out and up, lengthening through the bottom waist, and when you can't reach anymore, lower your hand to your block. Okay, so you should feel this, or many people will feel the stretch in the right inner thigh and maybe the right hamstrings. And root down through the right big toe mound. And you can either think of firming the right glute underneath you or spinning the right inner thigh toward the wall behind you. If you just do that, it's going to cause the left thigh bone to puff. So squeeze your left quad and then zip up through the low belly. And get rooted through your feet. And then use the strength of your sides and an inhale to rise all the way back up. Dial the right toes to face the long edge of the mat. And then from deep within the left hip socket, externally rotate your leg. Toes point to the short edge of the mat. Lift the right heel up, drop it back a bit. Squeeze the leg muscles to the bone. Begin to reach the left fingertips out and up, and then lower your hand to the block. When we take the block to the outside of the leg, that way we're less likely to lean forward. So squeeze your quadriceps. Root down through the four corners of each foot. Lengthen from the tailbone to the crown of the head. And so you're trying to firm the left buttock, the left glute forward and under you, and then really press back with the right thigh. Take another round of breath here. Get rooted through your feet. Use the strength of your sides in an inhale to lift all the way back up. Take the hands to the hips. Dial the left toes toward the long edge of the mat. And then we'll turn the right foot to face the front edge of your mat and step your left foot up to meet it. So from here, you can just move your blocks out of the way. Come back to the front edge of the mat, coming into symmetry. Inhale, lift the arms. Exhale, hinge and fold. Inhale to lengthen, draw the heart forward. With your exhale, we'll step to down dog. Couple rounds of breath here, again finding this even symmetrical shape after all of that asymmetry. And then from here, we're going to come into pigeon. So if you are tighter, you might want to grab a blanket, and then you can take your blanket and roll it up so that it'll support your hips a little bit more. If you're not tight, you don't need the blanket probably. So we'll set this off to the side for a second. So we're going to take our right knee behind the right wrist. Your shin can land wherever it needs to land. Okay, so it does not have to be parallel to the front edge of the mat. And then reach the left leg as far back behind you as it'll go. If when you do that, your right hip is not supported by the floor, you can grab that blanket roll I just showed you and slide it underneath the right sit bone and the left thigh bone. And if you don't feel like dealing with the blanket, You can always just tuck a block under the hip instead. And reach the left big toe straight back. And so now you might be feeling a stretch in the front of the left leg, as well as the right outer hip, maybe even the right inner thigh. What we don't want to feel is any pinching in the hip crease or anything at all in the knee. So if either of those things are happening, you can come back onto your back and take figure 4 again, which is where we started. Otherwise, you can either stay upright or you can fold over your leg. And it's nice to have the head supported either by a block or the stack of your hands if it doesn't make it to the floor. So if you have a prop nearby, you can lower your forehead onto the prop. So in my teaching, I have noticed that there's 2 types of people when it comes to pigeon. Maybe there's more, but I haven't noticed them. And they're either the people who are fidgeting the whole time because it's a lot of sensation, or the people who could fall asleep because they're super mobile. So if you feel a ton of sensation here, that's when we want to try to focus on our breath. The longer you can make the inhales and exhales, the more the muscles might start to release and open. And another thing that you can focus on is this sensation and how it comes in waves. Right? We tend to think of sensation as constant, but it does come in waves, and there are moments when there's no sensation. So if we can focus on those moments, then maybe that part of the wave gets longer. And if you could fall asleep here, you want to also focus on your breath so that you try to keep your mind steady. And it is inevitable that your mind is going to go elsewhere. So if you're just here for the physical practice, that's always okay. And then we're going to start to walk our hands back toward our shin. Tuck your back toes under, lift the knee, press back to your down dog. So I tend to be one of the more bendy bodies, so when I come out of pigeon, I like to press all of the weight into the right foot to help stabilize the sacrum. But other people might like to lift the leg, allowing the blood to flow back into the pelvis, and maybe even open the hip. So you're stretching through the right quad. And then when you're ready, we'll come on to the other side. So looking forward, the left knee comes behind the left wrist. Reach the right leg straight back behind you. Support your left outer hip with whatever you have nearby if it's not on the ground. And if it's not on the ground, the weight will end up crashing into the knee, or the SI joints are getting compromised because you're tipped off to one side or the other. Right? And when we're tipped off to one side, that's the body finding the exit route again. So you can either stay upright or you can fold in. If it was useful to support the head with a prop, you can lower the forehead down. And then try to just focus on your breath. And in your mind's eye, maybe picturing the muscles in the left outer hip start to open, stretch. Notice the inner monologue. And try to come back to your breath. And then when you're ready, we'll start to walk the hands back toward the shin. Tuck your back toes under, lift the knee, press back to your down dog, either pressing all of the weight into your left foot, or maybe lifting the left leg high, opening the hip, and maybe bending the leg. And then we'll take one last long stretch here in down dog, lengthening from the wrist to the sit bones. And then we'll lower the knees to the floor. You can walk your knees a little closer to your wrists. We're going to roll over our ankles. You can just swing your shins off to the side. And then you might want to sit taking the long edge of the mat. We're going to come into Upavishta, or sometimes called straddle. Okay, so this is going to get the inner thighs and the backs of the legs again. Kneecaps and toes point up. When we're tighter, we tend to be rocked back. And the knees will point out. And when we're more bendy, they tend to go with us. So if your knees are rocked out, you might want to lift yourself up onto a blanket. Or you can tent your fingers back behind you, and that should do the lifting as well. Press your thigh bones down. Push the big toe mounds forward. You can stay right here. Or if you want to fold in, you can use the block to support your low belly if you have more mobility. So again, you're not just collapsing into the pose. You can also use a block or a stack of blocks out in front of you to just rest the elbows on. We won't be here long, just trying to give the inner thighs and the hamstrings one last stretch. Breathe into the legs. And that just means we're thinking about the inner thighs and the backs of the legs, especially as we exhale. And that might, again, send the signal to them to just release and soften. And then we'll lift ourselves back up. It can be nice to hang on to the backs of the knees, lean back and pull the legs together. And then from here, we're going to come down onto our backs. You could have a block or a blanket nearby. And then bend the legs, planting the feet. Press into your feet to lift the hips. You can slide your block underneath you. We're not going to go super high with the block because we're going to open the hip flexors one last time. So you can stay here if you're already feeling a nice stretch in the front of the leg, or you can slide your left heel forward and then maybe hug the right knee back. Hanging onto the back of the right leg or the shin, push the left big toe mound forward. Or if it feels okay on your low back, you can just let that left leg flop out. So you're feeling the stretch in the front of the left leg, but without feeling anything at all in your low back. And again, just a couple breaths here. And then you can bend your left leg, plant the right foot, pull the left leg in and slide the right heel forward. And then maybe hold on to the back of your left leg. And if you're feeling anything in your back, you want to keep the right leg active. Otherwise, just maybe let it flop open. Let gravity do the work of opening the front of the leg. Right, so you might be able to picture when we're sitting all day, these muscles just get shorter and shorter because they're hugged in just like my left leg is. So just let gravity open the front of your right leg. And then you can lower your left foot, plant the right foot, press into your hips to slide the block out of the way. It's always nice to end our practice with the twist. So if you want, you can cross the right leg over the left, scoot the hips over, lower the knees to the right, reach the right arm out to the side. And then we'll lift the legs back up, recenter your hips, cross the left leg, scoot the hips over to the left, drop the knees to the right. And then you can lift yourself back up, hug the knees into the chest. Maybe take some rolls to come forward. So I hope that whether you're doing this at the start of the day, your hips will feel ready for the rest of the day. And if you're taking this practice at the end of the day, you've undone all the sinning that you may have done. Thanks for joining.